off the cliff. It jumps the shark, and will explain a lot of the ins and outs. So overall, I hated this film.
Swords. They'll cut you wide open. Well, not this one. I bought this bamboo sword at an anime convention in the mid-2000s per the rite of passage for millennial anime fans. Back then I was obsessed with anime like Ninja Scroll and Inuyasha, so of course I bought one of these. Over time, however, possessing these swords brought a negative connotation. The obnoxious and geeky shut-ins quickly became associated with the ownership of these weapons. It became so absurd that it eventually resulted in an iconic meme that graced the internet in the year of our Lord 2016. A bespectacled young man dressed in jeans and a dress shirt, unsheathing his purchased blade, and then came the cringiest of declarations. When you were partying, I studied the blade. When you were having premarital sex, I mastered the blockchain. While you wasted your days at the gym in pursuit of vanity, I cultivated inner strength. And now that the world is on fire and the barbarians are at the gate, you have the audacity to come to me for help. Thus, swords became embarrassingly associated with the insecure incels. Just put that over there. The association grew to such a degree that it's no longer surprising that a misogynist loser has one or more sword in their arsenal. I'm reminded of Renegade Cut's video in which he attributed the acquisition of swords to straight culture, in the same way that someone might refer to a gay man as being, well, you know, he's a little light in the loafers. You might refer to a straight man as, well, you know him, he's got swords displayed in his living room. Now, of course, I'm not saying that if you have a sword or study up on the history, craftsmanship, and the usage of swords that you're a pathetic incel by mere association with the item. It is possible to be really into swords and not be an annoying loser with poor media literacy skills. But Shad's not one of those guys. Shad M. Brooks, aka Shadiversity, has a YouTube channel that is all about swords. He looks at sword technique, sword history, sword design, and how swords are used in popular culture. It's all swords all the time for all your sword desires. And Shad seems to know his stuff here, or at the very least is passionate enough to speak on this subject. Now, I watched some of these videos and they're not bad. I mean, they're nothing I'm all that interested in, but I could see how a hardcore fantasy geek would really love these videos. But Shad also has a second YouTube channel called Night's Watch. And what did he put on this channel?
Well...
But before I dove into that pit of shit, I decided to read Shad's novel, Shadow of the Conqueror. And I think it's fascinating when YouTubers write a book, especially a fictional narrative, because it can reveal a lot about them. You discover what they find important, what stimulates them, what angers them, and what ideologies they want to convey with their writing. So let's go through his book, but just to warn you, it's pretty bad. But hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Well, actually, you kind of do. I don't have somebody else reading the book here. I just, you know, I'm doing the bit from, like, Reading Rainbow where, like, they would cut to kids who would be reviewing the book, so, you know, they would just transition over to, Hi, I'm Mark, and I want to tell you about a book I read called Shadow of the Conqueror, written by Shad M. Brooks. The story follows the adventures of Dalen, aka the Great Bastard, aka the Scourge of Nations, aka Dalus the Conqueror, aka War Criminal. He's an old man who resides in a fantasy world that is magical, sci-fi, and inverted. Having lived a life of regret, which includes murder and forcing himself upon women who didn't want any of that, Dalen is ready to die. And even though he's old and doesn't have long to live, he decides to speed things up with a suicide, the action, not the drink. He plans to do this with a magical item called Darkstone, which the book spends way too much time explaining. While Dalen attempts to end his life by jumping off the edge of the world, he's somehow magically transformed into the body of a younger man. Why? Apparently, the mystical force known as light has cursed him to live because that is what he considers the greatest punishment. Okay, so I guess life is a fitting punishment, even though he seemed to think that death was what he deserved earlier, but okay, whatever. The opening premise suggests the makings of a decent story. A terrible person wants to die, but is forced to live in the hell that they have created. He waged war, created unjust laws, ruined the lives of many women that he sexually assaulted, and built all sorts of technology that shaped this world that is still plagued with chaos. This should be a redemption story, but it's a tall order of redemption for a character who murdered and sexually assaulted far too many people. That's not to say it couldn't be done. One of the problems that faces stories about a character turning away from a dark lifestyle is the fear that such a life looks too cool. A character may want to stop killing or go sober, but the previous time spent killing and drinking looks fun, exciting, and cool. And Dalen can fall into this trap. He is portrayed as dressing cool, doing cool things like fighting with swords, and drinking like a badass. Framing him as someone who murdered lots of people and sexually assaulted women would make him easy to dislike. You could run with that to ensure that there'd be no danger of readers misreading the character as aspirational. But Shad's approach is to say, forget all that, let's just make Dalen cool. All those unwanted sexual acts and murders he did, sure, that was bad, but it was in the past. You've got to move on and just look at how cool Dalen is now. So you can just ignore all his past crimes and focus on his current heroism of brutally murdering people and being seduced by women that he'll turn away because he's too cool now. Now, Dalen's full crimes are not revealed until the end of the book, but I think it's worth highlighting them now. Dalen's crimes include 28 million counts of murder and 427 counts of sexual abuse against girls. Not women, girls. Dalen brings up that while he might have married and tossed aside several women throughout his legacy, he wasn't that bad of a person because he never married below the age of consent. The age of consent in this world is 14. One of those teenage brides was Lyra, and Dalen marries her when he was in his 60s. This is a story where the protagonist was once a 60-year-old man who married a 14-year-old girl. Now, one might think that given that Dalen has another chance at his youth, he'd start looking differently at life. Maybe he'll escape the brutality and the misogyny and try to improve the world that he has sullied. But he doesn't do that. He's still a murderer who viciously brutalizes people in horrible ways. But now, he's only killing the bad people. And by bad people, I don't mean like cruel warlords or unjust elites. No, Dalen loves to viciously slaughter thieves. No thieves in particular, just any thieves, just stealing random goods. It doesn't really seem like a fitting punishment for the crime. Because if you actually think about thievery for more than just a minute, you'd realize that there's usually a reason for that crime. Most people would argue that robbery is a product of various social and economic factors that make that crime so prevalent. But that's not considered in Shadow of the Conqueror. No, in this book, the thieves are just bad people who don't have the good light energy in them. And that's apparently all the justification that Dalen needs to kill these thieves. Now, some questionable people will probably come to the defense of this story by saying that Dalen isn't supposed to be a good guy. He's framed to be a flawed man who doesn't know better and is struggling to seek redemption after being a disgusting person for decades. You can't get mad at Dalen just because he's not the hero you wanted. Okay, so here's the deal with this. I'm not mad at Dalen because Dalen doesn't exist. He is not a real person, and I cannot directly get angry at him for marrying and sexually assaulting 14-year-olds. Dalen is, however, a product of Shad's imagination. Shad wrote this character and framed him the way that he wanted. Shadow of the Conqueror was not a story bestowed upon Shad from a muse. It was his story, and he wrote it based on where he wanted it to go. What you write says something about you, and this book reads pretty damn gross. One of my favorite point-and-click adventure games is Disco Elysium. In this urban fantasy setting, the detective you play as, Harry, is a loser. He's a drunk, unhealthy, crashes cars, makes women feel unsafe, can't be trusted with weapons, and is just generally pretty pathetic, despite his record of solving a bunch of cases. The path you choose in the game is not about undoing the damage that you've done, but rather trying to accept your shortcomings and find a new path. You can settle into being a boring cop, a capitulating liberal, a reformed authoritarian turned communist advocate, or even a bigger loser who has turned into a fascist. Harry's past problems are recognized as disgusting and pathetic no matter the route you choose for redemption. Moreover, the story does not justify Harry's more controversial choices in assault and murder. At one point in the game, you can fire a gun at a kid who is heckling the police. If you miss, your partner Kim looks down on you for making this choice. choice. And if you do hit the kid, Kim doesn't pat you on the back and say that the kid deserved it. No, if you kill the kid, the game ends immediately, because your murderous actions are not justified. Although Disco Elysium lets you pursue routes both communist and fascist, there is still a message communicated when taking these routes. One of those messages is that it's not cool for cops to shoot kids. There are a bunch of unique thoughts that you can gain in the story that can change how your character views the world. One of those thoughts is gained after you talk to a gay man, and it's called the homosexual underground. The thought is described as your character being over your own sexuality and that you're no longer going to question it. But also, you never stop questioning it because you're lying to yourself. This results in a hilarious conversation you have with Kim in which you say that you're not concerned with sexuality anymore. But then you ask if Kim is in the cult of the homosexual underground, the most awkward way that a man can ask another man if they are gay. Shadow of the Conqueror treats sex the same way. The book introduces Dalen's sidekick of Arik as coming from a race of dark-skinned people with a different perspective on sex. They consider the act of sex shameful, and thus decide to walk around in the nude in hopes of humiliating someone in their tribe into being turned on enough to make a move. But also, because this culture has everybody already nude, the naked body is not considered sexualized when it's constantly present. So which is it, book? Are these people above sex, or is sex still something that threatens their culture? Are their exposed bodies considered sexualized or not? Why is this book so weird about sex? Speaking of sex, Dalen also fights some pirates on a pirate ship where the cargo is women forced into carnal servitude. This happens after Dalen and Arik commission an airship that will bring them to the capital so that Dalen can fix some paperwork to clear his name or some shit like that. I don't remember. I'm not rereading this crap. And it's not entirely impossible given that he has had his way with hundreds of women over the years. He realizes this while fighting the pirate Blackheart, who states that he's Dalen's son. But since Blackheart is evil and took hostages, Dalen shoves his sword into the pirate's butt. Slowly. It's bizarre that Dalen is caught off guard and feels fragile when realizing he has kids. Like all the men he murdered and women he abused, that means nothing. But babies? I'm a father? And it should be noted that Dalen's reaction isn't one of awestruck joy that he has created life or an extension of his being. No, Dalen views this as a weakness because having so many kids means that he'd have to pay child support. I mean, it makes him less of a man. So all the pirates are murdered except for one young pirate called Zane because he got roped into this lifestyle despite being a good kid. Yes, all the other pirates were horrible people who deserved to die in terrible ways, but not this kid. This was the only good one, so he doesn't get sodomized by a weapon. Dalen will later retreat to his room on the ship where he's approached by some of the rescued women who find him very hot. And this is when the book starts just flying off the rails. One of the young girls, forced into sexual servitude, offers herself up to Dalen. Dalen wants to reject her because it wouldn't be right, but also his new body is young and horny. He wants to have sex with this young girl even though he is an old dude in a young body, and to pursue this relationship would make him much worse than he already was. So Dalen does the only thing a noble man of true virtue would do when approached with the temptations of the flesh from an abused and fragile woman. He yells at her to leave. Once Dalen arrives at the capital, he gifts the airship to Zane and tells him to forge his own path in life. He also tells him to get a girl pregnant, which is not something a noble hero would say. That sounds like something your gross-ass uncle would tell you that makes you just want to get in your car and leave immediately. But because this book is gross and weird about sex and women, this is treated as great wisdom from the heroic and sage Dalen. Worth noting during Dalen's time at the capital is that he gets a whole bunch of new powers and levels up. And this brings up an aspect I've been neglecting to talk about thus far because it's so boring. You can usually tell an author's key interests based on what they spend the most time describing in detail. Tom Clancy, for example, really loves military technology and will spend a lot of time writing about submarines and fighter jets in great detail. Shad clearly loves sword fighting, but also fantasy games, because he writes a lot about characters gaining new abilities, leveling up, putting all their points into certain skills, and advancing their skill tree. He also spends an excruciating amount of time explaining magical items that are really not that interesting. So there's some leveling up with Dalen where he can now recall his history better and dual wield weapons. And although these aspects seem reflective of video games, it comes off more like that kid on the playground who would just keep making up cool new abilities when they play. Like, look at me, I can fly, and oh, I'm invincible, and I can conjure lightning, and also everybody likes me and I have a million girlfriends. Also present at the Capitol is Lyra, the woman who was abused by Dalen and married him when she was a mere teenager. But she doesn't know that Dalen is actually the same man, the man who married and abused her. So this camaraderie is really gross, especially with Dalen falling in love with the woman that he had previously married. The plot at this point, if you care, involves Dalen trying to find the Donis, because apparently the Donis is this group that wants the old days of the Empire back when Dalen was in charge. So after Dalen and Lyra do some heroic stuff around the Capitol to make you forget that Dalen married and abused this teenage girl, they eventually find the Donis. And their leader is a very sexy woman who has the hots for Dalen. There's a dumb little debate that Dalen has with the woman before he reveals that he is, in fact, the Conqueror, worshipped by this group, and he thinks that her rebirth ideas are dumb because he's good now and not evil. All of this leads to Auric finally putting two and two together and realizing that he's been working with a former warlord. They battle, and Auric calls out Dalen for being a terrible human being. And he's right. Dalen sucks, and he should die. But then Dalen says Auric isn't so different from him, and then Auric forgives him. So just forget all that stuff that Auric said about Dalen being a monstrous person who deserves death. That's all in the past, and the two are chummy again, just like that. Like, one moment Auric thinks Dalen is a monster, and the next moment they're friends again. Everything's fine. Dalen's cool. Don't question all the very problematic shit that he did. So Dalen and Lyra fight, and there's more skill tree stuff I don't care about, and all of them eventually go to stop the island from crashing into the Capitol, and Dalen can stop it by forming a giant sword with his light energy or some dumb shit like that. So Dalen saves the day, but then he has to go back to the Capitol and answer for his crimes, which, mind you, are 28 million counts of murder and 427 counts of sexually abusing girls. Everybody Dalen has wronged gets a chance to make their case, and Dalen feels really bad about all that. But also, the women whom Dalen forced himself upon and got pregnant confess that Dalen's really not that bad, and that they love their children born from Dalen's seed. But those who didn't get pregnant, however, hate Dalen. So the book wants us to believe that the women who are horribly abused would feel a whole lot better if a baby popped out. Don't believe me? Does that sound too gross? Well, here's a quote from the book. Try not to throw up. Strangely, it was the women who didn't have any children by him that seemed to despise him more than the others. To them, Dalen had truly ruined their lives, many not ever finding marriage, and a few still bearing deep psychological pain. I think now is the best time to bring up that Shad, the author of this trek, has a Mormon upbringing, because it feels like that fact explains a lot of the choices made in this book. So Dalen is sentenced to death, and despite how much he pleads with Auric not to revive him, Auric decides that he's going to bring Dalen back from the dead anyway, because Dalen is such a nice guy, and he needs to keep doing nice things in the world. I mean, how could you hate him? What has he done that would make you possibly hate this guy? But Auric doesn't really have to do any of that because the court finds Dalen not guilty. Because of course it does. Dalen is the best boy and all his millions of crimes are forgiven because babies make abused women happy. And that's how the book ends, with Dalen answering for none of his crimes, getting to be young again, and learning absolutely nothing because he is the gariest of Gary Stews. So yeah, that's Shadow of the Conqueror. I don't recommend it, and you should avoid it at your local library. Now, armed with the knowledge of Shad's views from his book, I feel like I can watch his Night's Watch videos with more perspective. Understanding his mindset towards crime, masculinity, femininity, and sex will make it clear why he says very dumb things about movies. Although different from his Shadiversity channel, Shad still wields swords for Night's Watch, but these are the swords more utilized by the Knights of Anti-Intellectualism. Let us first gaze upon his review of the Barbie movie entitled Man-Hating Feminist Trash. Here, Shad has chosen to wield the sword of masculine insecurity. This sword is commonly used by men whose masculinity is so fragile that it will crack at the slightest swipe of criticism. Thus, the fragile men will arm themselves with this defensive weapon to protect their masculinity, for it is not robust enough to survive something like the Barbie movie. As a bonus, he has also employed identity politics defense to counter any criticism that he may face for his male perspective. In other words, he brought his wife on this video as backup, although she doesn't appear on screen for some reason.
This film is one of the most blatant, man-hating, activism-charged, deranged, subversive, intersectional pieces of insane, hyper-indulgent, third-wave feminist propaganda I have ever seen. And I'm not kidding.
Okay, where to begin with this statement? Let's first address the man-hating aspect. The film takes place between the two worlds of Barbie Land and the reality that has created Barbie. Barbie Land is clearly framed as a matriarchy, with the Barbies assuming most of the duties and controls of the society, while the Kens have a lesser place as their careers seem not to extend beyond beach. The reality world that Barbie and Ken enter is framed as a patriarchy, leading to culture shock for both of them. Barbie is dismayed by this world that embraces misogyny and infighting among women. Ken, however, marvels at how much more freedom men have to do whatever they want. Conflict arises when Ken brings his newfound misogyny back to Barbie Land, but he isn't framed as a villain who needs to be put back in his place. Because while the Barbies do resume control, they also recognize the agency the Kens have been missing from this society. In the same way that Gloria delivers her memorable monologue about how hard it is to be a woman in a man's world, Ken also confesses how less he feels in a world where Barbie doesn't value him as much. The solution is not one gender to dominate Barbie Land, but for an equality of breaking free of previously established rigid boundaries. Breaking that mindset isn't easy, as Ken admits that his whole purpose in life has been Barbie. But this is countered by Barbie stating that there's got to be more to his life than that. This point is hammered home when Barbie creator Ruth Handler states that Barbie is an ever-evolving figure. In the same way that Barbie can change professions and races, so too can we change ourselves and our world. Which is why the second part of Shad's assessment is baffling about this being third-wave feminist propaganda. I could understand that mindset if the film had never developed Barbie Land past its feminist utopia, but because of Barbie's existential dread about a world that never changes and Ken's longing for a life that always seems out of reach, it's fair to say that the film spends more time critiquing third-wave feminism than just blindly swallowing its empowerment without examining any of the repercussions. Like, sure, it is third-wave feminism in the sense that it questions gender role stereotypes, but not at the sacrifice of addressing the placement of men in that ideal world. So the idea that the Barbie movie is a piece of third-wave feminist propaganda is very absurd.
So that's right, the trailers didn't have any kind of warning signs that this was just for propaganda to really push certain ideologies or anything like that.
I did not expect feminism in this Barbie movie from Greta Gerwig, director of such films as Lady Bird and Little Women. Who could have foreseen this type of film coming aside from those familiar with her movies?
The director, or someone high up who made it, I think it was the director, was saying, "This isn't a feminist film!" Well, now I know, having watched it, whoever said this wasn't a feminist film, it was lying through their teeth. This is an insanely, not only, because there are different levels of feminism. No, this is third wave, intersectional, subversive, man-hating, power-hungry, destructive feminism type of that. And it goes off the cliff. It jumps the shark, and will explain a lot of the ins and outs. So overall, I hated this film.
Oh, Shad. Honey. Barbie is really not as aggressively feminist as you think it is. But hey, you know what? I'll throw you a bone here and give you a film that fits this descriptor that you've unwittingly assigned. This is The Misandress, a 2017 German dramedy that is a highly radical feminist film. Directed by Bruce LaBruce, the film is essentially a feminist reimagining of The Beguiled, a story in which a collective of women take in a deserting and injured soldier. In this movie, however, the man is taken in by a feminist terrorist group. Their liberation front is treated more like a school where the young women progressively learn filmmaking, lesbian sex, and filming lesbian sex. There's a lot of divergence from The Beguiled throughout The Misandress, but the biggest change comes in the ending. The outsider man dies just like in The Beguiled, but instead of being poisoned, his penis is cut off in graphic detail. And instead of just tossing the body out and pretending that nothing happened, the women arm themselves and take their liberation to the streets, where they forcibly separate men from women. Now, personally, I have mixed feelings on this film, but if you really want a destructive feminist film to go after, The Misandress is right there. Like, good grief. The film is called The Misandress, a term explicitly used for those who hate men. And look, I know that Shad isn't familiar with this film, considering he thinks that Barbie is the most radically feminist movie out there, but if Barbie really got him this heated for threatening him as a man, his head would explode if he watched The Misandress.
What I was not expecting was the insane level of man-hating in this film, like unbelievably so, and the amount of disdain Barbie has for Ken.
Did you only watch the film's first half and then just fall into a hateful fugue state?
Ken is the antagonist of the film.
No, he's not the bad guy, Shadunstan checks in. The film clearly establishes that Ken's lack of agency and purpose in Barbie Land needs to be addressed. He's not defeated by banishing him to the Shadow Realm or something dumb like that. It seems pretty obvious that the true evil of this film was the adherence to gender stereotypes that grow out of a patriarchy or matriarchy where autonomy and equality are not favored. Saying Ken is the villain of this film is a huge reduction of what is being communicated here.
He is the ultimate bad guy. I was not expecting them to actually make not only Ken, all the Kens, the evil people who they need to save Barbie Land from. And not only that, this is the summary of the film. I'm not kidding, okay? Barbie takes Ken into the real world. Ken discovers, the amount, how they portray the world is just insane. It's the most hyper, exaggerated, insulting, misogynistic piece of crap world you could ever imagine. It's the world that insane feminazis who despise men think the world is like.
Yeah, so any man that they come across, dog whistles and makes crude comments and
sexist beyond belief.
Yeah, is a jerks and only worried about money and themselves
and power and control and keeping women down, and it's the most hyper exaggerated insanity you could imagine. And it's like a feminist wet dream because they think the world is that way, but also I really get the impression they want the world to be this way to validate all their resent and their activism and stuff, because that means they can really stick it to the man and make propaganda junk like this.
Yes, because absolutely none of the misogynistic things that happen to women in the Barbie movie could ever happen in reality. This film is too cartoony. I expected more from the Barbie movie, which opens in a pink-covered fantasy land with imaginary water and defying of gravity.
And so Ken discovers patriarchy in the real world, takes it back to Barbie world, overtakes Barbie world with patriarchy, and Barbie has to save Barbie world from Ken and patriarchy with I'm not kidding, feminist propaganda, okay? And when I say, and it's also like the most contradictory, horrible type of what's the word? It's like hyper indulgent, exaggerating, playing into women's insecurities type of propaganda to justify all this type of sticking it to the man stuff. They save it with that. That's the film. It is a film that defeats patriarchy. Patriarchy is the enemy, Ken is the enemy, the bad guy, and Barbie defeats patriarchy.
By insecurities.
By insecurities and feminism. And I'm not kidding! You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not!
You are really exaggerating here. The propaganda in question is framed as what is deprogramming the Barbies not to be subservient to the Kens. The taking over of the Kens, however, is crucial for this type of story. The Barbies have only known a life where they've always been in power and various careers of independence. When the Kens' patriarchal reign forces them to take on limited roles of housewives and maids, they come to experience the oppression that the Kens have previously been living under.
So, the part that confused me, so most of this movie is pointing about how the patriarchy is the problem. However, most of those insecurities that she rants about are often caused by other women.
Yes! Yes!
I'm listening to all these things. I'm not thin enough. I'm not good enough. But it's always comparing to other women.
Yes!
The men aren't the ones making the comparisons. It's us against ourselves and women against women. And so I'm like, why would this make a difference of saying we've got all these problems when we're causing them to each other?
Exactly.
It's got nothing to do with the patriarchy.
You know, men and women could both be making those sexist remarks. More importantly, though, that type of infighting only benefits the patriarchy further. Because if women spend more time fighting each other, they'll spend less time fighting the sexism from the men who have more power to get away with it. Now, I'll spare you this long diatribe that Shadali Parton explains about how men have problems too, which, dude, we know. And that does get addressed in the film. Maybe not to a heavy degree as women, but there might be a reason for that. It might have something to do with the gender association of the product and the overall messaging of the film.
When Ken overtakes the Barbie world with patriarchy, all the Barbies in that world become, I guess, male servants, right? That are just there to get the beer out for the men and everything like that. And
it's so relaxing. I don't have to think anymore.
Yeah, like all this insane crap. And it's like this film is vile in the sense that it's trying to depict that this is how men want their women, okay? In a patriarchal system, like men want their women to be dumb servants, basically. And I find that so insulting just as a man.
Ryan Gosling's Ken makes it pretty clear that the reason he did this was revenge. An entire group of men who have only known a matriarchy are suddenly introduced to the concept of patriarchy, where they can take control. The Kens like the power swing because they have never had this power before. When Barbie questions Ken about this coup, he makes his feelings clear. He takes ownership of Barbie's house and directly asks her, "How does it feel?" The reason that the Kens take over and force women into servitude is that they feel they have been devalued. You know, a thing that men feel when their feelings are hurt. Something that men have to deal with, the thing you keep bitching about here. And also, why are you insulted by these men? What threat do they pose to your masculinity? The Kens are dorky and dumb, but they are also men who have grown up in a fantasy land that women have dominated. They're also given agency by the end of the film, recognized for how they were mistreated in Barbie Land. The feelings of men are considered in the Barbie movie. And speaking as a man, I wasn't really offended by the Kens. I was able to laugh at their childish understanding of how patriarchy works in an attempt to better be respected. That's because their methods are silly and ultimately ineffective. Now, I'm a big old cinephile, and even I could laugh at how the Barbies can distract the ego-driven Kens into talking about The Godfather or Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's just funny stuff and doesn't insult anything I would say defines the positive traits of men. I don't feel attacked, but clearly Shadanger 5 does, since he's wearing a chainmail to protect himself, which is also why he's wildly swinging around the sword of masculine insecurity.
This whole film is a really pertinent, illustrative analogy of what modern extremist intersectional feminism is. Because I'm not saying that feminism hasn't had a role to play in women's rights in the past, but I'm talking about right now, the type of feminism they're pushing.
So as far as feminists and such, I guess I would consider myself a happy feminist. I'm very much in favour of equality on both genders. I'm actually happy with the equality that we share at this time period. You know, I can get any job I work for, get any degree I want to get, based on what I do, my merit, not on my gender.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually a happy feminist. I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
Oh good, I'm so glad the world is equal for both genders in this period. But also, if you're a woman living in certain states in America, you can't get an abortion. even if you're underage or sexually assaulted or have a medical emergency that would require an abortion. But hey, feminism is complete because women can have jobs. For now.
And so at the end, all these Kens who feel oppressed and disregarded, right? They're still there, and the Barbies, when they're reinstituting their government, they have an opportunity to institute equality, and they don't.
They say, no, we're not going to put you in the government with everybody else. We'll give you a lower spot.
They said, can't we have a man on the Supreme Court? And they're like, no, maybe just a lower representative or something like that.
Yeah.
Like this is the evidence and proof that modern day feminism isn't about equality, it's about power.
But the Kens are not used to equality. They've only existed under a matriarchy where one gender is in charge. So when presented with a world where men are in charge, their first thought is not, hey, let's have gender equality where men and women will be treated with respect. No, they think men can run Barbie Land, so let's just take it over. It's also very absurd that Shadil Pickle here keeps saying this film is all about power when the movie makes it very clear by the end that neither a matriarchy nor a patriarchy is ideal. If all you took away from the movie was that men are bad and women deserve all of the power, you were not watching this movie. You probably weren't listening to it over all the teeth grinding you were doing. So the video continues for over an hour, and it's more of the same from this dude. It's just bitching about this film being feminist propaganda and boasting about how much he misread the film. And he is just so unbelievably angry about this film that he thinks is feminist propaganda.
The whole purpose of this film is to encourage women to gain power and to oppress men. That's the that was the takeaway.
It was another division movie. It's not like let's work together and make it right. It's us versus them.
Us versus them, and then women winning and purposefully instituting themselves in power to oppress men and don't solve anything.
Oh, but Deep Space Nine here wasn't done with Barbie yet. No, he had to take one more swing at the fantasy beast of the feminist Barbie movie with his sword of insecurity. So he made this follow-up video. Ken was not the hero of the Barbie film. This time it's only dudes in this video, with his pal Nathan as the co-host. So now that the women are away, let's really open up about what men truly thought of the Barbie movie.
The fundamental thing about Barbie, and I feel this is, you can't really argue against it, the intent behind it, right, is for feminist propaganda, all right, and to decry the patriarchy, men bad. The world is a patriarchal horrorscape where women are oppressed constantly and women's lives suck, basically, okay? That's the intent behind it. And they really push that through in a very, very heavy-handed way.
I'm pretty sure the fundamental intent of Barbie, a movie based on a toy by Mattel, produced by Mattel Films, and distributed by Warner Brothers, was to make money. Like, sure, Greta Gerwig clearly wanted to say something about gender relations, but the primary reason that Mattel and WB pulled the trigger had more to do with people wanting to go see this movie and the brands that it would be associated with.
Because there are a number of people who have come out of Barbie being on Ken's side.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
It's probably because Ken has given more agency over hurt feelings about not feeling good enough. I think Ryan Gosling's adorable dork performance also helped. He truly was Ken-uff.
First of all, that's the exception. Most of the people coming out of Barbie, getting like if they even are wanting to take on the message, I see a lot of people that just try and ignore the message and just wanted a fun Barbie thing, and they get annoyed with culture war and politics and stuff, and so they just try and ignore it even though it's really in your face.
Did they ignore the culture war politics? Or did it not bother them and they thought the messaging was good? Maybe they don't actually care about the culture war crap that you keep bitching about. That could be a possibility.
But then I feel there's a lot of people coming out of this film that are getting, I guess, acknowledged in the sense of victimization and insecurities. There is a narrative in Barbie that really doubles down in validating a lot of stereotypical female insecurities. And I personally don't think that's a positive message at all. In actual fact, I think we should try and make women feel secure about who they are as women, and that men are here ready to support them, help them out, and we want to work together to make a better world. Okay? That's the message that we should want. To try and double down on these insecurities, it's just going to make women feel more unhappy. All right?
Yeah, I mean, Shadork just wants to make women feel safe and secure. I'm sure he did that for all the women who cozied up with this copy of Shadow of the Conqueror, where the vast majority of the women are sexual assault victims from a young age who forgive their abuser because they have babies.
If you have an inclination to feel insecure about a lot of things, sometimes it feels good to be validated in this. This is actually a more stereotypical female behavior. I had to learn this when I got married, okay? When my wife would come to me wanting to vent and talk about some of the problems that she's dealing with, she didn't want me to fix it. No. And I found that frustrating in the extreme. It's like, but I can help you fix the problem. No. What she wanted was for me to listen and to validate her feelings.
Yes.
This is such a foreign concept for most men. Not all men, but most. It's just like, what? And I just could not understand. Like, if you're telling me a problem, don't you want me to? Why would you tell me a problem if you don't want me to fix it? No. And so it is a very female kind of behavior.
Given how you write about women, Shadonut, I think it's best that you not try to fix their problems.
And women know this instinctually, by the way.
Yeah.
Like I've seen my wife comfort other women, right? Just instinctually, she knows what she needs to do, and it's like sometimes just giving them a hug and validate and consoling them and understanding the emotion that the other woman is feeling. And my wife just understands it instinctually, and it's a credit, and it's one of the strengths of women, because men and women are different, and each of us have our strengths that make it awesome to be it's awesome that women like to be women, and it's awesome that men like to be men, and we should celebrate the strengths that we have. And this is a strength that women have that should be celebrated.
According to Shadinobot here, the distinction between men and women is that women have instinctual empathy, as opposed to us men, who apparently feel no instinctual empathy, because you see, girls care about feelings, but boys care about the swords.
Barbie is made by women, okay, and they kind of understand that. And so
Barbie was co-written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. It was produced by David Heyman, Margot Robbie, Tom Akerley, and Robbie Brenner. There's an even split of men and women in the most crucial roles in this film. It's a minor nitpick, but the way that Shadoubledare phrases this statement makes it seem like women made all the critical choices in this film.
There is a big message in the Barbie film about acknowledging and validating insecurities, but also things that women deal with. But then it doubles down, triples down, and goes way overboard and exaggerates them to a ridiculous level, honestly, like really ridiculous level. And this type of validation, like I said, isn't good, because sometimes instead of validating insecurities, what if we built up make them feel secure about who they are, okay? And that's a positive thing, and Barbie doesn't do that at all.
Did you not watch the ending of this film? Because the ending clearly wants to celebrate the power of being a woman. In the ending, Barbie desires to become human in the real world instead of being an idea in Barbie Land. And before her transformation, Ruth says this:
Being a human can be pretty uncomfortable. Humans make things up like patriarchy and Barbie just to deal with how uncomfortable it is. And then you die.
And despite those warnings, Barbie still wants to become a human woman. After being impressed with Barbie's choice, Ruth then says this:
We mothers stand still so our daughters can look back to see how far they've come.
And then comes the most tear-jerking moment in the entire movie. After this, Ruth and Barbie hold hands, treating Barbie to the bittersweet memories of other girls and women, showcasing all their joy, frustrations, and insecurities. With the award-winning What Was I Made For playing over this scene, the film couldn't be more overt in the messaging that it's trying to make clear. Being a woman is hard, but it's worth it. And yet, Shaded to Rights here treats acknowledging the insecurities of women as terrible messaging. Don't talk about your problems, only show the good parts of women. So saith the author of Shadow of the Conqueror.
So it is messaging like that I think some women are connecting with, okay? Other women not, but I think some women are resonating with that message about this movie gets how hard it is to be a woman. There's a line in this film that says, "It's impossible to be a woman."
Okay.
That's a dumb line. Because, look, in reality, it's not true.
Shaddy laddie, do you really think that when Gloria went on a big rant about how it's impossible to be a woman, that she meant that line literally? No, you can't. You cannot be that dumb. You have to know that when people usually say, oh, this task is impossible, or this math problem is impossible, they're just saying it's very hard. She's saying it's hard to be a woman.
Okay, there's a lot of women that don't find it that difficult to be a woman. In fact, they love being women. Being women is great and all that stuff.
Oh, well, good for them. I'm glad those women feel entirely secure in their gender and don't feel the same societal frustrations that Gloria has in the movie. But Shaduku, some women do think like Gloria. They do share those frustrations, and sometimes having a character express relatable anxieties is comforting because it makes you feel like you're not alone with your feelings.
And it's look, it does strike you as a very female line, doesn't it? It's impossible. Like, I don't know. I've come across less men saying it's just impossible to be a man.
Quite right, Shado Amazo. This is a woman line. Probably because it was written for a woman. Imagine complaining about a woman in a movie saying something believable. I mean, like, usually you complain about this when it's the opposite gender being written for. It's like if a movie featured a woman saying something like, oh, brave knight, please show me your lovely dick and balls that are of adequate size. See, that's when you make the comment, a man definitely wrote that line. That's how you make the criticism. Also, do you know why most men don't say something like, it's impossible to be a man? Do you think there's a reason a woman would be more frustrated with their gender role in society than men? Maybe because men don't face the exact same challenges and pressures as women.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe it's the feminist upbringing I had that's like, well, guys have it a bit easier in some aspects.
See, Nathan gets it. I don't like how he backs down too easily, though, and just lets Shaquille O'Neal here keep ranting unchallenged.
The way it's acknowledged in society is not balanced. Men, honestly, they complain less about their hardships.
Yeah.
This shouldn't be a controversial statement, because the whole suck it up, you know, and what's weird is feminists even complain about that in regards to men. Men never go to the doctors enough when they're in pain or injured and stuff like that, and that's a thing of toxic masculinity, and that's them literally acknowledging that men complain less and deal with pain personally more and don't make a public thing out. They make a public thing out of their own pain and suffering less than women do.
Men not talking as much about their feelings is not some intrinsic thing that men are born with. Some men don't talk about their feelings because they feel they won't be validated. I didn't refuse to communicate with my classmates in grade school about how sad I was feeling one day because my man-stinks told me to. I didn't speak about my feelings to my classmates because they had previously called me a homophobic slur, and I knew they'd do it again if I showed any signs of being more open with my emotions around them. And that's not a good thing, Shadopolis. It's unhealthy when you can't express emotions because of societal stereotypes that say you shouldn't. And some men actually do make a public display out of their pain. Some even go on a murderous rampage. So it's not good for men to have this trait.
It's not about that, in terms of virtuous masculinity, it's not about that men should be taught to never express their difficulties, okay? It's that I think men should be taught to do it when it's appropriate, okay? And when you really need it. Because a lot of times you need to suck it up because there's a job to be done, okay? And so breaking down when there's something that needs to be done is not going to be helpful, all right? You stub your toe when you're chopping the wood. Yeah. Suck it up, the wood needs to be chopped, okay? It's important for men to be taught to do that because there's heavy lifting that needs to be done in society. There are vulnerable people that need to be protected. It's the honorable duty that men have that should be taught to be upheld. That's a positive thing.
Okay, I don't think stubbed toes are the issue for men who don't feel they can cry. I think it's for when they feel pressures of work, when somebody hurts their feelings, when they've lost a loved one, you know, the things that most people typically cry about. But also, acknowledging your physical pain is beneficial as well. You can suck it up all you want, but if you don't just stub your toe and like accidentally swing an axe into your foot, it's probably a good idea to acknowledge that pain and stop what you're doing to treat your wounds. If somebody winces in pain after stubbing their toe on the job, the correct response is, are you okay and can you still work? Instead of just saying suck it up, because if they're not okay, the work really won't get done if they're hindered in their abilities to perform a task.
It's funny, the book Women Are From Mars, Men Are From Venus, or I
way
forget
around.
which
Yeah,
planet.
yeah.
They call it like caving, I think it is, that men go into their cave to process their emotions, where women like to express and talk about their emotions. Very different stereotypical ways. I know there's exceptions on both sides, but stereotypically, these are the ways that, we go through our emotions. But
Shadaddy Longlegs here is talking about John Gray's 1992 book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. The book describes the divide between men and women, but has come under a lot of fire for being so reductive. Many sociologists and psychologists have found that the book's assertions on gender are pretty bad. In a 2004 article by Irina McGeorge, a professor at Purdue University, she stated that Gray's book, quote, tells men that being masculine means dismissing feelings and downplaying problems, which many men themselves that read the book disagree with. That isn't what most men do, and it isn't good for either men or women, end quote. Professors Bobby Crothers and Harry Rice went even further to disprove the book's claims with a study. 13,000 men and women were gathered for a study to find the difference in personality traits and preferences between the two genders. Their findings were that men and women were not so different in how they view topics involving relationships and sex. Quote, thus contrary to the assertions of pop psychology titles like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, it is untrue that men and women think about their relationships in qualitatively different ways, end quote. You want to know what the study was called? Men and Women Are From Earth. Now, all of that is to say that Shaduli's use of Gray's old book to assert perspectives on gender does more to hurt his argument than support it.
Men receive less sympathy for their hardships than women do, right? And I think men have just as much crap they deal with as women, but men go out of their way to protect women more than they do to protect men. And so women's problems and sufferings get acknowledged more than men do.
Man pain better than woman pain, barked the YouTuber in chainmail.
And the Barbie movie is just exactly that. A lot of this is, it's impossible to be a woman. It's so difficult. What's really divisive and vile about that is then it starts to perpetuate the message that women are uniquely more oppressed to a really large degree, more so than men. Men get it easy. They get a free pass through life, where women, it's just impossible. You're either not thin enough or you're too thin. And there's this whole diatribe where they go through this stuff.
Shatterday here is complaining about Gloria's monologue by arguing, but what about the men? Do our lives not matter too? All lives matter,
And it's funny, the film is also self-aware enough to acknowledge that sometimes it's women that also criticize other women about that. The daughter says at one point, men hate women and women hate women. And look, that's just a subversive, bad line for multiple levels, because this is reality. Men don't hate women, okay? Men actually love women. We're attracted to women. We would love to get in relationships. And a lot of us men want to build families with women, okay?
Oh yes, this old chestnut. Men don't hate women. Why would they hate them? They got the boners for the ladies. So because men want to have sex with women, that negates any hatred they have. I'm sure Dalen from Shadow of the Conqueror doesn't hate women either. I'm pretty sure, though, last I checked, that some men hate women because they won't have sex with them. I think there might actually be a collective of men who do hate women for that specific reason. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I don't think wanting to go to Pound Town with women removes any doubt of your hatred of them. And at this point, Slim Shady here is repeating the same talking points about this movie, just lying about everything. That every concerning aspect of Barbie is just a feminist fantasy and that none of the concerns are that bad. Concerns like feeling unsafe in public around other men. That's not a real concern of women, so saith a man. Then we get to addressing Ken, and once more, Shadow the Hedgehog here keeps repeating that the film wants us to hate Ken.
And so, yeah, it does feel bad for Ken, but the purpose of it is to make you feel bad for women, not to feel bad for Ken. Because one of the hot takeaways of the film is that Ken deserves it. He deserved to never have been acknowledged. He deserved to be a secondhand thing. And people trying to, like the people who made the film, trying to justify it because that's the role of Ken the doll. He was an accessory, okay? He should be a secondary character. I agree he should be a secondary character, but he shouldn't have been hated, okay? And oppressed and belittled, right?
I don't know how anybody can watch this film and think that Ken, of all characters in it, is supposed to be hated and that his feelings are never validated. Again, I think he wasn't watching the film and just gnashed his teeth the entire time, unable to hear the dialogue over his dental grinding. The ending features Barbie telling Ken that he's not bound by his association with Barbie or his beach career or his material possessions. She doesn't belittle Ken, but rather stresses an acceptance of independence and his ability to change. The scene where Barbie tries to tell this to a tearful Ken is actually rather sweet and validates the way that men feel dependent on certain aspects that they feel define them as such. Ken didn't have to always be by Barbie's side or endlessly pursue her for romance. He could be his own man. But as for Shadiversity Abbey, I don't think this was the version of Ken that he wanted. He wanted cartoon Ken.
Barbie, Dreamhouse, cartoon show. Ken was absolutely a secondary character, but Barbie loved him and he had his virtues. And one of his virtues was actually a masculine virtue, to help Barbie whenever she was in trouble. He had a Barbie sense, like a spider sense, that he would be like, Barbie's in trouble, she needs my help, and he would run to go help her. I liked that because it is the man's role to help women when they're in trouble.
Even when the women didn't ask for help, which is something that happened in this movie, because that's just what nice guys do.
And then Ken starts to see patriarchy everywhere. Again, really false, disingenuous depiction of the world where he sees a world run by men, and you see like images of Sylvester Stallone, and in all the advertising, men are everywhere. I'm like, hang on, advertising like billboards. Sexy women are usually on those things vastly more than men. With the adage, sex sells.
Ken ventures into a skyscraper where he's treated to a montage of men in advertisements for U.S. presidents, dead U.S. presidents on dollar bills, a tailgating advertisement, a golf advertisement, horseback riding, various sports ads, footage from Greece, footage of stock markets, and a series of shots featuring Sylvester Stallone. It's not really that hard to believe men populate those types of ads. Sure, women get lots of ads too, but we dudes get a lot of ads directed at us as well. And it's really childish to act like women are so dominant in advertising that men would rarely be seen in ads meant to target them. One of my least favorite ads in the past few years was for Dr. Squatch's Men's Natural Soap. The commercials were annoying, but also rather insulting, as they kept trying to stress how real men need a real soap that makes them more manly. Sure, because men feel very emasculated when they need to use stuff like Dove or Dial. Those are girl soaps, and men want man soap. You know, the soap that comes in the box with the cartoon Sasquatch on the cover.
And so Ken discovers patriarchy, that it's the patriarchy. And the real world, it's not like that at all. Patriarchy is not ruling the world, okay? It's a myth.
Oh, come on, Shadoopy. You seriously don't think there are any patriarchal systems in the world today?
Now, in terms of a patriarchal system, there are systems that are patriarchal, like traditional households. Either the man is the head of the household. That's a traditional patriarchal system. And guess what? It's a system that men and women pushed for.
So we're back to the gender stereotypes again, huh? And at this point, Shadvertisement has just gone off about how a patriarchal system is good because men are protectors. He acknowledges there are patriarchal systems, but none that really affect women that much. Don't bother looking into that.
But in terms of the overall, it's a patriarchal system that's oppressing, that women can never be CEOs or never get in government and stuff like that. Bullcrap. Absolute nonsense. But that's what the movie wants to depict.
Sure, because men never discriminate against women when it comes to getting jobs or getting into government office, except for all the times when it does. An annual survey from the Young Women's Trust found that discrimination against young women in the workplace has grown from 42% in 2022 to 53% in 2024. Compare that with young men whose discrimination reporting only went from 38% to 40% in that same period. In fact, 2023 had an even higher level of discrimination against men, so that level of discrimination actually went down over the course of a year. Not to mention the gender pay gap is still present. Like, it's narrowed, sure, but it's still there. And it's still a problem. It's still an issue when women are not paid the same as men for the exact same job. Also, patriarchal systems that restrict women's rights still exist, shadump. You know, like Saudi Arabia, where women are expected to be under a male guardianship or be arrested. That seems like a patriarchy to me. So we get more misreadings of the patriarchy coming to Barbie Land, but then Shadoofus adds in this extra bit in post.
I'd also like to comment on the perspective that Ken is a type of men's rights hero. That is really the hero and main character of the entire film, where he leads revolution and liberates the oppressed Kens. We do need to remember that the Kens were put back into their oppressed state at the end of the film. None of this liberation was even achieved, and Ken himself, at the end, acknowledges that he was wrong, and that the Barbies are right to treat the Kens in this manner, and that everything he did in the film was evil and vile, and that women really are the oppressed ones in the real world, thus the Kens deserve to be oppressed in Barbie world. Not only is that a horrifying message, that is the supposed hero of the story betraying everything that he was supposedly fighting for, and not only losing at the end of the film, but joining the other side and fighting against all the positive things people might interpret that he was representing.
What a shitty misreading of the film's ending. You had to put that in post? You already said that earlier. What was the point of adding that bit in there? Were you just like, oh man, I don't know if anybody is really going to believe me in saying that Ken was the villain and made men look vile. Maybe if I repeat it a few more times, it'll stick.
This next part I find particularly funny. And I think this was I think they did this by accident. I think they did this because they were just bad at their jobs. The Barbies, under the patriarchy that Ken imposes, are all really happy. They're bimbos. They're bringing Ken's the beer on a plate, and they're doing all that. But they are all, each of them, really happy and loving this, and they adore their Kens.
Unlike the Kens who were suffering before with the Barbies.
Well, the Kens were oblivious to it, right? But as soon as Ken kind of got acknowledgement, then he's like, this is really good, right?
It almost seems like both the Barbies and the Kens could only accept a system where one gender was more dominant because that's all they knew. Almost like they weren't thinking for themselves and were shackled by roles dictated to them and not realizing their own independence. Kind of like gender stereotypes that are dictated by those in power.
But it is interesting. It's just like, the film is showing the Barbies perfectly happy under the patriarchy with the Kens.
Except for stereotypical Barbie, who has realized her desire for independence, and stereotypical Ken, who views his patriarchy not as a just system, but a revenge for feeling devalued. To look at what Ken did to Barbie Land and only notice the smiles amid obvious subservience is to miss the entire point of the gender dynamics in the film.
And then, what I find even more hilarious, the way that they break the brainwashing of the Barbies is to make them realize how awful everything is, essentially to make them unhappy.
Yeah.
So what an interesting self-report about feminism.
Oh yes, Shadirt Devil argues that the Barbies would be much happier if they didn't have careers and were entirely dependent on men. But surely that can't be what he is saying. I mean, he's not really trying to argue that feminism is unnecessary for addressing women's oppression, right?
If it was so obviously bad, they wouldn't need feminism to show them that it was bad. They would just be unhappy with it as it is. I don't need to feel a whip on my back when I'm enslaved to realize, oh, I'm enslaved, you know, right? So if it was truly, truly bad, feminism wouldn't be needed because all women would be aware of it by the very nature of how awful life is for women. But it's actually not like that.
The Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of the equality of the sexes. So yes, the Barbies are using feminism to advocate for their rights, but also an equality that is reached with the Kens, which Shadoopy here just keeps misreading. But he really needs to keep swinging that sword at feminism, because women don't need that to fight for their rights. What they really need is not patriarchy, because that doesn't exist, but a mysterious third thing. So we get more bitching about Gloria's monologue, that the film is anti-men, and blah, 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 and we end on the same repeated talking points.
Because the film is very clear about what it is. It's anti-male, it's man-hating, and it's feminist propaganda through and through.
As you might have guessed from the videos I've shown thus far, Shadorkus is married and has children. And if you're a young man, you might also want that lifestyle for yourself. Well, if you're a young man, you'll be happy to know that he has a video just for you. It's called "This Breaks My Heart, a message to young men living without hope."
Now, I'm going to be speaking more to young men because I can understand the challenges that they're facing on a personal level. And it's honestly breaking my heart seeing what's happening in the world and the struggle that many of you guys who are my fans and viewers watching, and hence why I'm making this video.
Okay, yeah, there are unhappy guys in the world right now. He's getting a bit emotional, so it seems like this might be coming from a genuine place.
It doesn't seem like a lot of you guys don't know what you need to achieve in life to find satisfaction as an individual, happiness for who you are, being proud of who you are, being confident with who you are, and finding purpose in life.
Okay, so far so good.
I'm speaking genuinely, and this is not the co-opted use of this term. I am speaking from a position of privilege in this, because I am married to one of the most, the most amazing woman in the world. And I have 5 of the most incredible children in the world. And they are the greatest source of happiness I can express, I've ever experienced. They are my life.
I'm not so sure I like where this video is going.
And it makes the drudgery of life have purpose and fulfillment. And suddenly I feel satisfied with who I am and what I'm doing in life, because what I do matters to them. And I want you to have that. And it breaks my heart that so many of you think you can't achieve it.
Oh, so, okay, so you're under the assumption that young, depressed men would be happier if they were married and had kids. But what about those who can't afford kids, or those who can't biologically have kids, or young men who are gay and would have to go through a much tougher process of adoption, which would also be expensive? How are they going to find happiness? I mean, wait a minute. No, he can't. He isn't saying...
The greatest source of happiness, fulfillment, and purpose that you'll find in your life, which is, yes, family, okay? Get married. Women find a good husband, men find a good wife, raise a family, and do it right. I'm not saying there aren't heartaches. I'm not saying there can't be tragedies that happen along the way, or that these relationships break down. Okay? What I am saying is, when done right, they are absolutely the greatest source of happiness and fulfillment you will ever have in your life.
Okay, he is saying what I thought. But come on, Shadonky. I mean, there are exceptions here.
There are exceptions. Don't care.
Oh. Well, at least we know where he stands.
We can't stop saying that. This is the greatest source of happiness and fulfillment. Men find a good woman, women find a good man, build a family and life together, support one another, and your life will be happier and better, and you will find purpose in it to a greater extent than you can probably comprehend at this point. This is where I'm speaking from a point of privilege, because I am experiencing it, and it is the greatest thing in my life, and I want you to have that.
Okay, Shadormatory, it's great that you found happiness in marriage and family, but not everybody will. Some people might find the greatest happiness in other aspects of life. So it's a little bizarre to hear you get so flustered over everybody else not having the same life as you. Also, it's pretty bad to stress this point if the goal is unattainable for one reason or another. Like, did your date turn you down? Happiness denied. Did your wife divorce you? Sorry, no ultimate happiness for you. Were you unable to conceive children? Well, according to Shadevil's Advocate here, you'll never find a purpose in life.
Seems like the world is trying to reduce that. And for me, I see it feels like, especially for men, when they're constantly denigrated and told that they're inherently violent and that they need to be taught not to do horrific things, as if they wouldn't know that inherently, that they don't have an internal conscience to determine what's right and wrong. No, they need to be taught not to rape. And if not, they will become raping, misogynistic, vile, abusive scum.
Speaking as a man, I think it's a good thing to teach men that raping is not okay. I don't think not raping is an inherent quality in men, nor do I think sexual assault is inherent in men either. I do think, however, if men grow up not knowing that rape is bad, they'll probably do it because of, well, all the rape we have going on in the world right now. So we get a long rant about how men and women don't need to have sex so much and that they should save themselves for the right person, and then we get this passage where Shademon Knight stumbles into a double entendre.
The goals of relationships is to not hook up. The goal, if you really want to achieve this happy ending, which is the greatest source of fulfillment and happiness you will find in your life, you need to look for it properly.
We then get some basic tips on improving yourself as a man, stuff like developing a skill or working out, the standard self-help suggestions. But don't worry, ladies, Dr. Phil has tips for you as well.
And for women, that actually also means working at the same tasks that will make you the most attractive prospect for your future spouse. Yes, homemaking. Learn how to cook. Learn how to raise children, sew dresses.
Okay, I think Shadoos Almighty here should just stick to talking about men. Next up are some tips about behaviors to avoid, which for Shadoo Gavril here is anything sexual.
Okay, guys, do you think your future spouse will respect you more or less if you're constantly looking at porn? Girls, do you think your future partner will respect you more and less if you're posting skimpy images of yourself online?
Yes, tone down all the obsession over sex. Some relationship advice from the author of Shadow of the Conqueror. There's more generic advice like don't try to date tens and think of the qualities that you want in a partner. He goes through the requirements that he had when he was seeking out his wife, and they're just very standard traits like, having the same relationship goals and a similar sense of humor. I do appreciate that Shadipping Dots here recognizes the worst piece of advice that he could give to other people based on his own relationship.
This is the part where I don't necessarily say you follow my example, because I dated my wife for 2 weeks before I proposed. We were married 2 months after, and now we've passed 13 years happily married.
Yeah, I don't think I'd tell most men to propose after 2 weeks of dating. Also, getting officially married 2 months after a proposal is also really speedy. I don't think I've met a single couple who speed ran their relationship from dating into marriage in roughly 2.5 months. That just sounds like really bad advice for someone who might rush too quickly into a relationship. Shadisney then addresses where to find a good woman. Well, not really. He doesn't have an answer on where to find them. He will, however, tell you where not to find them.
They don't know where to find them. That is truly a difficult thing. I don't know if I have the answer. I know how I found mine. And I think I have a sneaking suspicion that places like Tinder and other dating apps also might not be the best place to find them either. It actually might require you going out in the world and interacting with people, okay? Yeah, there's a lot of crazy people online. That's where they all congregate. So stop looking for them online, maybe, okay? Start looking for people in the real world. And how do you do that? by finding ways to interact with people in the real world.
Ah, yes, because if there's one thing that Shadiddle's audience can't get enough of, it's hookups on Tinder. I'm glad that he's finally setting that lot straight. He eventually gets around to saying that you should go places where your interests lie. In the case of Shadungeons and Dragons here, it was Dungeons and Dragons. But also, he recommends the Mormon Church as a great place to pick up women. And at this point in the video, he's basically pitching the LDS Church because that's where he met his wife. This goes on for several minutes in which, again, he outlines his developing romance like it was a workshop project. 2 weeks of dating, 2 months married, we get it. You speed ran getting hitched. Not exactly the best story to tell men who feel like they've got no time left to find the right one. Unless, of course, this is a pitch for the Mormon bride in a fortnight service. But what about the men who don't want to become Mormon because they're of a different faith or they're atheist? Where should those young men go instead?
And so, if religion isn't for you, try and find institutions or organizations or clubs or activities. Like, if you're geeky like me, LARP might be one of those things.
Oh, okay, so just, like, go somewhere else and join a club, or, you know, like a LARP club. But, how do you join one or find a romantic partner through such an activity? I don't know, and don't ask the Mormon Knight here. He scored at church. He can't help you with the whole club thing. Just go looking for a place or club. You'll probably find one. Maybe. Or not. There's more talk about bettering yourself and not giving up hope that really feels like the most generic self-help diatribe. But then, he speaks more directly to his audience with a passion.
The fact that there are so many young guys, they appear in the comments, I see you, you watch this channel, right? There are so many of you that want this, but feel hopeless that it can't be achieved, proves that there's a lot of guys that want to achieve this. Girls, there's a whole lot of guys right here that are trying to work towards this thing. And all the girls complaining that are wanting a good man, all right, who will step up and actually be a man, all right? That shows that there's still a lot of girls out there that want you. You just need to become the type of person that they want. And it's not an unrealistic standard. It's just becoming a man and women becoming women. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, just be a man, you young men without hope. It's easy to find a girl. Just be a man. Another sound piece of original advice you won't find anywhere else online. This is just horrible advice.
Knowing is simple. Becoming is a lifelong thing.
Did he just say coming is a lifelong thing? I don't know if I like where this video is going. Okay, I'm pretty sure he meant becoming is a lifelong thing, but the captions tell a different story. And then the video just ends with him repeating himself, saying you need to better yourself. And like, Shadover boy, I can tell you really do care about hopeless young men, and you want to help them. But I don't think you gave them much here. Any YouTuber or podcaster can tell men not to give up and just be a man if you want a wife. But if you really want to inspire those who have lost that hope, I honestly don't think it helps to tell them that you went from boyfriend to husband in a matter of weeks through your church. Shadon Draper might not be offering the best advice to men, but I think his heart is in the right place. He does want men to be happy, and he's not wrong that part of finding that happiness will come from improving yourself. I think men should take inventory of themselves, work on aspects that can better their life, and focus less on movements that create further isolation and division, like Gamergate. So anyway, here's a video of Shadirty Harry obsessing over the second coming of Gamergate. Oh, this is a sword I didn't think would be picked up again, but Shadurwood has equipped the sword of Gamergate, one that carries a shameful history behind it. Let's see how he wields it with his opening move.
Welcome back to The Watch, and I am autistic.
And the video's off to a bad start.
Is Gamergate 2 over? And the answer is no, because Gamergate 1 never ended.
Because luckily for us, war is eternal.
Okay, so you just never moved on from this embarrassing shit. A quick reminder that Gamergate was a movement to harass women that were criticizing video games, and that it was organized through 4chan and 8chan. 8chan, by the way, was the board known for legally questionable sexual images and would later become the future base for QAnon messaging. Also born from these boards was the mascot of Gamergate called Vivian James, a character who was built around an in-joke about sexual assault. So yeah, you should feel embarrassed if you're still supporting this. Not to mention the resurgence of Gamergate is extra embarrassing because the target became Sweet Baby Inc., a consulting firm focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion in video game narratives. The implication among Gamergaters was that Sweet Baby was forcing wokeness into video games like Alan Wake 2 and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But they don't have that power. They're a consulting firm that works with studios like Remedy Entertainment and Rockstar Studios. Sweet Baby was hired for games like Alan Wake 2 for sensitivity readings of the script, but that's not the same thing as censorship. Censorship implies that Sweet Baby has more say in the game than the studio that made it. And they don't. Even worse was that Gamergate 2 was being driven by Grums, aka Mark Kern. A lot of Gamergaters rallied around this guy because he worked at Blizzard Entertainment. 20 years ago, after he left Blizzard, he founded Red 5 Studios, and he mismanaged so much of the expenses that he was kicked out of his own company. Now all he can do is cling to Gamergate in hopes that people will fund the indie game that he's been working on for so many years and hasn't finished despite all the backers that he has. So yes, Gamergate 2 is very pathetic, even more than Gamergate 1.
This is the thing about Gamergate 1. It had a big wave of prominence and discussion, all right? But the battle of what was being fought for in Gamergate 1 just continued, even if it stopped getting reported on. The thing is, though, a lot of people kept reporting on it, following the woke infestation of gaming and the continual push for it and all that stuff. That, was getting covered by YouTubers mostly for ages. And it was only the mainstream that kind of, though they kept bringing it up. They blamed the election of Donald Trump on Gamergate. They were so traumatized from it.
The association of Gamergate to the Trump presidency is not that grand of a jump. Covering Gamergate during its peak was Breitbart contributor Milo Yiannopoulos. With Gamergate supporters championing Milo's coverage, Trump strategist Steve Bannon took note of what Milo had done. Steve recognized Gamergate as a way to radicalize white male gamers who previously had no interest in politics. They could be moved to the right if they were fed the misinformation that the left were going to take away their games. Bannon would end up recruiting Milo to help further push gamers towards the Republican Party. He remarked on these men, stating, quote, "They come in through Gamergate or whatever and then get turned onto politics and Trump." So the people trying to get Trump elected and taking advantage of the emerging alt-right movement were well aware of Gamergate and saw it as a method of radicalization. And in case you're wondering what happened to Milo, he was abandoned by Breitbart in 2017 following the revelation of his advocacy of sexual relationships below the age of consent. He has also renounced his homosexuality, demoting his husband to the level of housemate. His words, not mine. But Shadopla Radar argues that Gamergate was warranted because Anita Sarkeesian made some videos that people didn't like.
Feminist frequency. Sarkeesian jumped on the whole, how sexist gamers are and everything, and started making her, such bullcrap feminist frequency videos about sexism in gaming. But because she was releasing those bit by bit, and people were responding to it and calling out for its bullcrap, it extended the Gamergate 1 saga longer than Gamergate 2.
And look, I didn't care for Anita's videos either, but not enough to warrant death threats or a massive hate campaign that made everybody involved look like the worst people. Remember the dumbasses who tried to make a documentary about her called The Sarkeesian Effect? It was made by the anti-feminist documentarians Jordan Owen and Davis Arini.
And this is where I think they've learnt, the enemy, the woke crowd, have learnt from their experience in Gamergate 1. Because now they're trying to go underground. They're trying to hide what they're doing, but be just as much activists as they ever were.
Maybe they try to keep it on the down low so that the man babies of Gamergate won't shit their pants and go on another completely unwarranted hate campaign, like they did last time with death threats and doxing. Then there's this whole section where Shadel Computers here says that all the woke stuff is not overt, it's just sneaking into media. You know, like the Blue Beetle movie, which had woke stuff in the trailer, but also wasn't that woke, but was also somehow racist towards Latin Americans despite being directed by and starring Latino talent with mostly positive reviews.
The line in the Blue Beetle trailer, Batman's a fascist.
I haven't seen the Blue Beetle.
Good. It's not a great movie. And
It just seems like a lame superhero.
yeah, it could be done. Like, there are like superheroes that have lame kind of concepts and ideas that end up, you know.
Kick-Ass was cool. I liked him.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. But that line, right, because it was in the trailer, just checked out so many people. It's like, all right, it's made by ideologues. And the film wasn't insanely woke, but it went... Blue Beetle is its own bag of fish. It stereotypes Mexican culture so much. It's the whole... We are going to be so not racist to the point we're going to be insanely racist. They wanted so much inclusion of Mexican culture that they ended up adding so many racist stereotypes of Mexican culture where they just want to eat burritos and all this stuff. It was crazy.
If you'd like to hear more of Shadug Funny's thoughts on Blue Beetle, you can catch him reviewing it with a bunch of other white anti-woke dorks on Friday Night Tights. It's a podcast-style review where they try to frame the film as racist with a racist joke in the thumbnail. Although I'd recommend you check out Pillar of Garbage's dissection of that podcast, considering he offers way more insight than the entire panel does. But you know, we haven't heard much from Shadunder Mifflin's guest in this video called Oz, so what are his thoughts on Blue Beetle?
You know, in India, they have the blue dung beetle as a superhero.
Okay, maybe it's better he doesn't talk.
One of the big warning signs, even if they don't show it in the trailers now or anything like that, if for gaming, if you want to see if a company has woke ideology, ESG, or consultancy, or anything like that, just take a look at the female characters. Are they attractive or not? That is such a big, warning sign, face-off thing that identifies, like, yeah, you can tell where they're going with it.
So, what? Wokeness is measured in boners?
Because they just hate femininity, they hate beauty.
Yeah, they hate beauty.
They hate sexiness, they hate the fact that men like, you know, sexy women.
They hate anything that falls within the realms of beauty and truth. You know, the two greatest pillars of reality.
Yes, right.
They wish they could attack God directly. Yeah. They can't, so they have to suffer. They have to make his children suffer.
Yeah.
I hate this world.
You really think studios didn't put smoking hot babes in all media because they hate God? The logic of these cosplaying dorks is a fascinating tapestry of the surreal. There's then this dumb analogy to wokeness being like poop on cupcakes, which I'll spare you because it doesn't go anywhere other than Oz getting hung up on how he doesn't like cupcakes. And then Shadooby-Doo and company recite the same claims about how Gamergate 1 never ended, but if it did, they won because Trump won the presidency. And then we get this shameful admittance.
And this is the thing I've mentioned. It was Gamergate 1 that red-pilled me on feminism. Before that, I thought, yeah, feminism, good. And then it was the insane... They revealed their hand. The mask was off. They showed this isn't about equality. It's about power. It's about female supremacy and men bad, right? And that's where I got, this is not a good thing.
Well, at least this video explains where his views on the Barbie movie came from. But let us not forget the casualties of Gamergate. Please, do not laugh, and show some condolences for the franchise we lost to wokeness.
There has been casualties along the way, specifically IPs, the things we love, right? Star Wars was sacrificed on the altar of progressivism. But
Halo first.
Halo as well. But this is actually, here is the white pill moment, right? They can't take away original Star Wars.
Of course they can't take away original Star Wars. George Lucas already beat Disney to it years ago. But like, he kinda has the right idea here, because you can still enjoy all those old franchises and ignore the entries you don't like. And most people can do this just fine without making a big culture war out of it. But not, apparently, for Shadiversity and his guest. No, the guest wants to find some way to attack those who changed his favorite franchise. And he describes this desire in a very concerning way.
But that's the thing, as they have new tactics of becoming more subtle and all that sort of stuff, we learn new tactics too. And the most recent one we've learned is from Warhammer, right? We need to actively help destroy it. We need to do it as soon as they get into a thing and infest it. You got to burn the house down to save the neighborhood. But let's say that these people invade your house and they slowly start destroying it with you still inside and your family's still there. Wouldn't you just evacuate your family, lock the doors, and light it on fire?
I think the analogy is getting a little out of hand, but...
Okay, fine. Wouldn't you lock the doors and blow it up? Okay, fine. Still fine. Wouldn't you lock the doors...
Nuke it from orbit.
And nuke it from orbit. Kill everyone inside.
I don't think he should talk ever. Or be allowed inside houses. Or near matches. I get the feeling that a lot of people who are still swinging the old sword of Gamergate have this frustrated view of the world. They don't like the progressive aspects that have protruded into their media, or perhaps more accurately, the progression has become more vocal as culture war nonsense has ramped up further. They can't fully define woke, but they do seem to recognize it as losing their place in the world. The perfect film that encapsulates this mindset is Zero Charisma. This is a dark comedy about Scott, a dungeon master who is so far up his own ass. But because he puts great effort into his tabletop campaign, his friends put up with him. That is, until they meet a more accomplished man who joins their group, the hipster Miles. He is a far more likable geek with a charming personality, making it easy to see why he has a girlfriend and a successful job. Something that Scott does not. As Miles essentially takes over the D&D game, Scott has lost control of the only thing he has going for him in life. He has nothing else to fall back on. He's awful with his family, he gets into fights with people, he's emotionally unstable, and he was fired from his job at the comic book shop for yanking his crank while on the job. Although Scott eventually gets his revenge on Miles via humiliation through losing his cool, Scott also specifies what he wanted out of this attack. He didn't want to assert his dominance in D&D because, as Scott puts it in the film, he needed someone to be an even bigger loser than he was. Scott's insular nature makes someone like Miles seem like an invader, not through trying to take over Scott's world of geekiness, but merely trying to have a place within it. It's a break from the norm, a change in the geek lifestyle. The chic geek has entered the den of the dorky geeks, and he wants to clean. And the weird geek with toxic behavior feels the need to defend his domain because this is all he has. Something like harassment might be his only hope to maintain his fandom for himself. Something like Gamergate. Now, someone like Shadorkus Malorkus might argue that, well, I'm not a shut-in loser, my entire personality isn't attached to gaming, I'm married and have children, and I still support Gamergate. Okay, but that's worse. If you have a family and a decent life, and you still want to wage an online culture war because you can't get a boner to the latest game with a woman, your priorities are a mess. When he tells his audience to keep up the fight with Gamergate, he is telling his audience who obsesses over decrying any perceived wokeness in media that they're not wrong to be this weird about it. And it really seems to run counter to Shademolition Man trying to stick up for young men and give them advice on how to pick up women. This is just an educated guess, but I'd say a major turnoff for the ladies is going to be your desire to keep Gamergate going. Shadilibar is right in the sense that Gamergate didn't exactly end, it just lost momentum and had been taken much less seriously by the mainstream, where nobody falls for the faux cries of ethics in game journalism. It went further underground, where it festered into something worse, and we can only hope that enough of its followers wake up before Gamergate returns to its roots of death threats and doxing, all in the name of trying to ward off the boogeyman of wokeness. But hey, this is getting a little depressing. Let's talk about a film that Shadracula actually likes. Kinda. With his video, James Gunn's Superman movie is great. And awful.
If you need a consistent plot and correct power scaling and cause and effect that makes sense with few distractions from the main characters and world, you will hate this film.
Okay, that's reasonably accurate. Yeah, if you're obsessed with power scaling and need to have everything explained to you, sure, you'll hate this Superman movie. So that's who is going to hate the movie, but who is going to love it?
But for me, as a massive Superman fan, I actually don't need too much for me to like a Superman film. What it needs to do is depict Superman right. And if done so, it's much easier for me to ignore or not get as distracted by some really dumb things in the plot. Well, I'm delighted to say that the James Gunn Superman film does this.
Hey, all right, maybe we're actually on the same page with this review. I'm a big Superman fan as well, and I love the movie. I love the characterization so much that I didn't mind how it packed so much into the script where some elements get, sidelined. So maybe Shaduperman isn't so bad after all. Let's see what he has to say about a superhero movie that he enjoys.
Of course, it would have been so much better if the story carrying this rendition of Superman wasn't utterly retarded.
I think I might have been a little hasty in my praise. Ableist slur aside, Shadoom Patrol here does highlight how he likes the depiction of Superman in spite of the plot he's placed within. But he still has some notes about the character.
And even though I love this rendition of Superman, it is not to say it is perfect. No, it's not. Superman has been considerably depowered in this film, and his powers are very inconsistent. He struggles to lift things you would expect Superman to be able to handle with ease. One villain in particular he should be able to take out with a single punch. And, minor spoiler here, but it's at the very beginning of the film, and it's shown in the trailers, the film literally begins with Superman's defeat. He is far from the indomitable hero he is supposed to be. He's actually very domitable.
That's an odd thing to say as a Superman fan. Look, I love Superman the Animated Series. It's a great cartoon, but it clearly limits Superman's powers. The hero isn't able to defeat every villain he comes across, and his powers are not always consistent. I think the best scene that showcases the inconsistency and necessity of this aspect is the brief scene of Superman shaving with his heat vision. There's a lot that doesn't make sense about this scene, like how the heat is able to bounce off the mirror, or how Superman's heat vision can burn off his hair when fire doesn't, but it doesn't matter because the scene is fun. Also, Superman's powers are limited not just so that he struggles with as many battles, but it gives him a reason to work alongside others. If Superman can do everything and is great at everything, why would he need Krypto? Why does he need Mr. Terrific? Why would he need anybody in his life or worry about any threat? As a Superman fan, I don't think it hinders the hero that he's not invincible to every opposition.
Now, at least there is no overt wokeness in the film. Unlike what the online discourse seems to have implied, there's no message about immigration, but one part of the film could be interpreted as an analogy of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict.
Superman is an immigrant. Not even that, he's an illegal immigrant. He was taken in by the Kent family, who did not reveal his alien origins to immigration services. The government doesn't recognize him as the Kryptonian Kal-El, but more as the human Clark Kent, the son likely born from Ma and Pa Kent, as far as the rest of the government knows. Shadopamine also glazes over the whole international conflict of the dominant Baravia wanting to invade the country of Jarimpur. The more relevant comparison would not be the war between Russia and Ukraine, but rather the conflict of Israel attacking Palestine. This seems most apparent given Baravia's relation with influential people like Lex Luthor, who sells them weapons, and how the people of Jarimpur do not have weapons to defend themselves. The depiction of tanks and soldiers attacking unarmed civilians of this country does seem more reflective of the genocide against Palestinians. Now, this is not to say that the film's conflict could also be applied to Russia invading Ukraine. It's presented with just enough fictionalization to be applied to both conflicts. But acting like this crucial subplot of the film is more of a maybe allegory is kind of a dim reading. Prior to the film coming out, Shadunkaruz also expressed a lot of displeasure he had for the inclusion of Superman's dog Krypto. He seemed to come around on this after watching the film. but only a little.
So for me, Crypto didn't add anything special to the film or detract too much, and it seems to feature such a prominent role, almost to manipulate people who like that kind of thing with a cute animal to make them, like the film more.
Yes, some people like cute animals. Crypto was cute and a fun part of the film. It's also weird to suggest that Gunn only included the dog to manipulate the audience and not because he, likes dogs.
Overall, I would say this film has more bad than it has good, but if you can ignore the bad or simply don't notice it as much, there is definitely enough to latch onto here to enjoy it. I give this film, because of so many of the dumb plot points, about a 3 or a 4 out of 10, even though I personally like the film.
What is this criticism? You personally like the film, but you had to give it a 4 out of 10? Why? Why can't you be honest about how you feel about a film? Okay, you know what? Maybe he'll expand on this when getting into spoilers here.
So, the story is wholly driven by Lex Luthor's desire to kill Superman. That is revealed later on in the film. They think Lex wants to kill Superman so Superman doesn't prevent the invasion of one country to another, but Lex actually says, no, that's a byproduct. He orchestrated the invasion to justify or set up a situation where he can kill Superman. Literally, every instigating plot is caused by that desire. Now, depending on how Lex actually wants to do this, affects how dumb his plans really are, because Lex has multiple opportunities to kill Superman throughout this film, and he doesn't.
I think it's pretty clear that Lex Luthor doesn't just want to murder Superman, but make it clear to the whole world that he is right to kill Superman. Throwing gasoline on an international conflict that Superman gets involved with will make him more controversial in how the hero gets involved with geopolitical issues. Blasting the concerning message from Superman's parents regarding procreation breeds further distrust. Lex doesn't just want to develop supervillains like the Engineer and Ultraman to obliterate Superman, as he could do that at any point. He wants the people and governments to give him the go-ahead to pull the trigger. Lex wants Superman humiliated and turned into such a liability that he'll be doing the world a favor by getting rid of him. So with that motivation established, I'll spare you Shadinkleberg's long rant here about how Luthor has multiple opportunities to kill Superman, but doesn't. However, I won't spare you from this embarrassing rant where he goes on about how Superman lets the Justice Gang handle an interdimensional threat.
Oh yeah, there is an interdimensional imp in this film, which Superman just basically sits by and does nothing, while others fight it because he feels they can handle them, and I did not like that part in the film, because what guarantee does Superman have that they would be able to handle this interdimensional imp? All my worries about what we saw in the trailer is actually confirmed. Superman just sits by while people are kind of fighting for their lives to stop this monstrous being, with him just kind of shrugging, saying, yeah, they'll be alright. With all the praise that I've given how they've depicted Superman, that moment in the film was actually, for me, one of the points where they contradict his character quite strongly, in my opinion. He actually had no guarantee that they would be able to handle it. Sometimes monsters whip out a mega, attack or something like that, and it takes a certain amount of time for the other heroes to subdue this monster, where Superman could have probably taken it out in a second, potentially saving thousands of lives by nullifying the threat much sooner. I hated that moment.
It should be noted that this is the scene where Superman is at his lowest. The public now hates him, and the Justice Gang distrusts him. And given that the Justice Gang didn't really listen to Superman all that much in their last fight, they're even less likely to accept his help or even allow him to help with handling this threat. Also, Shadumer is making a lot of assumptions about this scene. It's clearly established that the Justice Gang has a reputation for taking out major threats. They've likely encountered a threat like this before, and Superman probably feels that they could handle this situation without him. But more importantly, this scene stresses how the world can turn its back on Superman, because the immediate defense of Superman would likely be, well, who else is going to stop all these villains and monsters from attacking Metropolis? And the answer is Mr. Terrific, Green Lantern, and Hawkgirl. I don't think Superman just completely blew off this attacking monster and decided to endanger the entire city because he's sad. He states that he's sure the Justice Gang can handle it, and it'd probably be a good idea not to get involved with people who don't trust his leadership. So no, I don't think this was a terrible scene for Superman just because he wasn't the one punching the giant monster in the background.
Anyway, in the fortress, the engineer accesses the computer and finds the message from Superman's parents and then repairs it because it's damaged. It only has half of the message. And this unironically reveals that Jor-El and Lara, Superman's biological parents, are evil and sent Superman to conquer Earth, to also breed new Kryptonians from a harem that they encourage him to make. And instead of revealing this to be fake at the ending of the film, you know, or like Dr. Bilex or anything like that, Mr. Terrific literally confirms that it's genuine and it was impossible to be faked, meaning Jor-El and Lara are actually confirmed evil at this point. I mean, this is so bad that I expect it will be retconned perhaps in a later film or something like that, revealing that it really was fake all along, and that Lex was able to fool everyone. But that's not said in this film. The film actually confirms that Jor-El and Lara are evil, and screw that, I hate it.
Superman's Kryptonian parents in the film are depicted as wanting to preserve their race. They instruct Kal-El to conquer the planet and take many wives to further the Kryptonian species. I don't think this so much establishes them as evil as it does present an alien view of other planets that Clark does not hold. This also plays into the core aspect of family in the film. At the start of the movie, Superman repeats the corrupted message to remind him of the family that he never knew. But when he learns more about them, they turn out not to have his best interests at heart. Clark doesn't consider himself to be like the parents who birthed them. He views himself more like the parents who raised him. It's why the final scene of the film involves Clark switching his soothing family footage to home movies of growing up with Ma and Pa Kent. It's such a beautiful ending because it stresses how family is what you make of it, and that you don't have to inherit the sins of the father. So there's more nitpicking and more ableist slurs. Sorry, correction, the same ableist slur.
And oh my goodness, he put Superman in the most retarded prison possible where it is so obvious and easy for him to escape. Lex, by doing this, is an uncalculable, brain-dead retard.
And then he concludes by saying the film has a great depiction of Superman, but that it's also very dumb, but also very exciting, but also only gets a 4 out of 10. But also you can enjoy it if you ignore all the woke stuff. At this point, Shadumbo is wielding swords he doesn't know how to handle appropriately. The sword he used for his Mario trailer review is the Sword of Furious Fandom. Now, this is actually one of the easier swords to use. You whip up a fan base by saying that a particular adaptation is not being faithful. You have to be careful with this sword, though, because it's all about timing. You can't strike too quickly, though, because if you do, you'll make a video so misinformed that the fan base you stir up will turn on you. Watch as Shidoki Doki Literature Club hastily stumbles with this sword while addressing the Mario movie trailer. He comes out swinging decently by voicing the standard concerns of Chris Pratt doing the voice of Mario.
Alright, let's go.
See how
Let's go.
bad that is.
That was awful.
That was
Oh, Chris, I like you, Chris. This was not your role, man.
Okay, fair criticism. Shadandadan also voices concerns he has about the rest of the voices, but based on the previous videos that I've seen, you can probably guess which role sends him flying off the rails.
Bowser is coming.
All right, I need to go back.
Why?
That was an awful voice of Peach. That was like, Peach was supposed to be, you know, damsel in distress, high-pitched, girly, and stuff like that. That was total mainstream Hollywood girl boss voice.
yeah. Unfortunately.
So I'm not a fan of Peach's voice either at the moment.
Bowser is coming. Together, we...
What's wrong, Chad?
Here comes the misogyny.
Funny how a few moments ago Mario's getting beaten up by a monkey, and now Peach is looking real cool there.
Real tough. And
Next to the
strong.
Toad.
Is that one a halberd or
Really
or
capable.
an
He
axe
spins
or...
a weapon around. Now, pre-established character introduces a girl boss. Fine, new character. This isn't a new character. Peach has been an established character where she has been a delicate princess for a very long time.
You'd also say that's the core of her character.
That's the core of her
She's
character.
had girl boss moments, but especially in the a completely Mario IP focused movie, she should be the damsel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just the way she speaks, even if she's like a badass, she should still have that high pitched voice of
Absolutely. And you can have Peach like be out a fight, but to do it in line with a character in a girly, fun way, like they do in Smash Bros. All right, you don't have her whip out pants and halberd in Smash Bros.
Yeah.
Instead, she's fighting in a fun, girly way.
Yeah.
This is pissing me off.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that outfit has been in the Mario Kart games. Almost like she was wearing that because she was driving a vehicle. You know, like what happened in the movie. But pants. A princess in pants. A separate outfit for when she drives. That's what infuriates Shad. Insert funny suffix here. You can probably guess what infuriates him next.
Thoughts?
Traditional male hero being made look like a goofy idiot, and
Yep.
the female character competent. He's such an idiot. Why do I have to put up with it? Holy crap! This is freaking going woke.
It is.
Oh no, it went woke because Mario is goofy and Peach wears pants. And naturally, per the rule of woke, Shadecalogue here can't support the movie.
I was on the kids. I'll take my kids to watch. Now I was like, no, I don't support subversive woke crap. All right.
Okay, got it. The Mario movie is woke crap, and you won't be supporting it because you don't want to encourage wokeness. So naturally, you will not be going to the theater to purchase a ticket.
Well, now I need to watch it, not because I'm interested in it, just to see how bad it gets and let you guys know, because that's part of the watch that we hold.
Okay, so you are going to support the movie by going to see it for content. Any other dumb things you want to say?
Japan, you're our last bastion of normality in this sea of subversive crap. They were. Manga was still pretty based. What do you think now?
I am not even going to touch that statement.
Cool, yeah, pretending that Japan's media is very traditional and doesn't feature weird and subversive stuff. Brilliant idiocy on display here. And the comments section seems to agree. Now, I've seen plenty of comments in the other videos agreeing with Shadororo, but I don't think much of anybody was with him on this one. I think most Mario fans who played something like Mario Kart, or Super Mario RPG, or Mario Party, or Super Mario Bros. 2, or Smash Bros. Could tell you that Peach is not always the damsel in distress. So now that he fumbled with his reaction to the trailer, let's see how he fares after seeing the film. That he thought was woke and didn't want to support, but then saw it anyway. Here's Shadorito talking about the Mario movie in the video... Is it woke or anti-woke? Super Mario Bros. Movie discussion. And this came after he reviewed the film in a different video, but that video's over an hour long and I'm not gonna watch that crap.
The Super Mario Brothers film, is it woke or is it anti-woke? Is it a pushback against the woke agenda or is it dripping with wokeness?
This has got to be the most pathetic binary metric to approach a movie with.
Now, you loved the film.
I did.
You did?
It was great. I enjoyed it. It was wonderful fan service for me.
Yeah.
It was better than the original.
I didn't like it, okay? But the reasons for most of the reasons I didn't like it, you can see this in our review, is that I didn't feel the payoffs were nearly as good as it could be. I'm not a fan of the world personally, and the writing was a bit flat, and then there were certain elements in it of clear kind of woke ideology, intersectional ideology. When I say that, changes from the original character that seemed to only have been made primarily to appease kind of the more modern audiences, but it wasn't that big. Yet I see it so often that it annoys me more and more. And I find changes like this insufferable, which is why I went so far to say, like, the girl boss trope is insufferable and Peach is an insufferable girl boss. But I was also very clear that it's actually not that big, okay? And it's not overt or in your face.
Okay, so this is going to be like the Superman review, where there's clearly all the woke stuff that he bitched about, but the movie is good, so now you're conflicted about whether or not it's woke. This is an awful way to go through life.
I took a warning sign of Peach being in kind of that biker outfit. I'm not familiar with the Mario property, and so I'm not aware that she wore biker outfits a lot. And to me, that was a red flag because I was lacking the context. And I know Peach does appear on a bike in the trailer, but so small that I missed it completely. I didn't even see her on that motorbike. And she does wear dresses in the trailer elsewhere, but some of the key moments, like when she's getting ready for battle, she's suddenly wearing pants. And that would be a red flag based on all the other kind of indicators that we have.
You saw a woman in a biker outfit, and even though it made sense in the context of the movie and the video games, you treated it as a red flag for wokeness. Your brain is broken. You've poisoned it with all the anti-woke nonsense. It's all you can see now, and it makes you look silly.
Now, Peach wasn't nearly as worse or as bad as a girl boss as I was fearing from the trailer, which is why we didn't criticize the fact that because it makes sense she's wearing that outfit, because it's very clear in the film that she's on a bike.
Yeah.
So that all makes complete sense now, doesn't it?
I don't know, I think it made perfect sense for people who knew about Mario Kart. I should note that Shadaria here is clearly out of his element because he keeps diverting the conversation to talk about the wokeness in House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, and The Last Jedi.
The Peach, almost like for me, she was a celebration of girliness. And I found that really charming about the character. And even to the point where she does fight in Mario Properties, she does it in a really girly way, where she might hit someone with a frying pan, pull out a parasol, or duck behind, Toad, or these fun, really girly, cutesy kind of movesets, which I found really endearing and charming. Okay? That's not in the film.
No, it's not.
It's not.
You were previously angry at Peach for wearing her outfit from Mario Kart, a game you're apparently not familiar with. But now you're angry that they don't include her girly weapons from the games you have played, like Smash Brothers. It really just seems like you wanted a very specific version of Peach, a character that has become more active in the games and not always with her previous girly nature. With this in mind, Peach really isn't that subversive in the movie. Josh Spiegel from Slash Film wrote about this aspect in his review, where he stated, quote, "The movie flips the script so that Peach is not only not in distress, but is also Mario's true guide and a much more capable and powerful character than she was in the earliest iterations of the video games. That Peach is a character with recognizable agency as opposed to being a modernized take on the princess in need of rescuing from a fairy tale monster is unquestionably a good thing. But the choice also feels like the most subversive decision of a film from 25 years ago, not from 2023. End quote. But yeah, sure, Peach didn't whip out a frying pan or have a high-pitched voice. Wokeness is to blame for all this.
Over time, things have changed in the games, but I feel like that stuff hasn't been necessarily because of the woke movement, because it is Japan. It's more of Japanese trying to tip things on their head to be different and unique and change stuff. But then I think when they've brought this into more of a Western audience, that's where a lot of these ideologies have come out more.
Oh yeah, it's only woke if you insert progressive elements in American media. If you do it in Japan, it's not woke at all, because I guess by the logic of Dr. Pepper here, Japan is the last bastion of normalcy. Yep, nothing quite as normal as Japanese media.
Yeah, now, I actually really respect that. For the most part, a lot of Japanese brands and everything don't give a crap about what West, pushing everything. But we do see certain things where they do cave into the outspoken mob in the West and thing. Like, they change certain characters in the Final Fantasy series to be, less problematic.
Oh, yes, I remember this debacle. An entire collective of horny dweebs were getting all angry that the remake of Final Fantasy VII altered the character of Tifa, and the change they made was that she had ever so slightly smaller breasts. Her boobs were not gone, they're just no longer as massive as they were in the dated graphics of the original. And that's apparently the fault of Western influences, even though I found no evidence of Square Enix bowing to some social pressure coming from Western audiences. What was revealed in interviews was that the team behind the game decided to give Tifa a sports bra. It made more sense for a character who is constantly fighting with her fists and kicks in more realistic graphics. Tifa's minor shift in bra size was a practical choice made by the developers. But because a whole bunch of sweaty fans have spent decades lusting after Tifa's low-poly, big-boob character design, they got mad and assumed it was the fault of wokeness. This was a non-controversy. There was no conspiracy and no woke mob protesting smaller breasts on Tifa. And all the gamers who cried about this were made to look like the embarrassing fools that they were. Speaking of which, Shadui Cox here also embraces a rumor that the Western animation studio Illumination wanted to make the Mario movie more woke, and that Nintendo stepped in to stop it. And of course, he'd believe it, because Japan never does anything woke, apparently.
Because there is certainly a very clear avoidance of allowing Mario to save Peach in the film. Moments in the film where it would be perfect for Mario to come in and save the day, and there's like, no, Peach is going to save herself. And it's like, they even sneak in certain, because it's the wedding scene that I'm referring to, and even the final payoff of the film wasn't as satisfying to me because Mario wasn't able to do something clever on his own to achieve the victory. Wouldn't matter for kids, these criticisms, it's all fun for them. And I've said multiple times, I think my daughter would, just get on board with the Mary Sue girl power stuff because she's too young to really realize how much of a Mary Sue. Did you notice, like, everyone is loving Peach and she's always so capable, and she's a Mary Sue character. That's not a well-written character as a result.
These criticisms wouldn't matter to kids because they're bullshit. If Peach were a Mary Sue, she would not need Mario's help at all. She would be able to save her kingdom all on her own, but she clearly doesn't. It's also bizarre he thinks Mario is robbed of saving the day because he relies on power-ups. Power-ups? The mushrooms that you get in the game that help you through? That everybody uses. And also, Peach uses these power-ups as well, so she's not a Mary Sue, even by your logic. Man, Shadudley Do-Right here is really struggling to crowbar the wokeness arguments into this movie.
It's in this interesting middle point where the woke elements seem to be clear enough for people to point out. I'll point them out. Tim Pool has pointed them out. But even Tim Pool said it's not crazy woke. Like, on a woke scale, it's actually not to the brim. And I said it's mostly harmless. I said on Friday Night Tights, I said in our review, in isolation, wouldn't bother me. I just see it again and again. And then I also said in our review, I've been so clear about this, even if people want to try and lie and take us out of context and everything, is that kids will love it and it's not going to be, that bad.
Okay, so his stance is, it's woke, but not that woke. An acceptable level of wokeness, whatever that shit means. But at least he can say the film is harmless for kids and not some anti-woke film.
The interesting thing about that, because it's mostly harmless, okay, I can see why people would then say it's an anti-woke film. Because it's not woke enough.
Spoke too soon. So, what's not woke enough about the Mario movie that it's anti-woke? Well, according to Chainmail Chump here, it might be because there's no gay or black characters in the film. But I have not seen any of those arguments being made about this film. He does, however, bring up other woke shows that were criticized for how they portrayed gay and black characters, so he's essentially arguing the Mario movie could be seen as anti-woke because there are no gay characters and stars white people. And at this point, they're just repeating the same talking points of Mario being woke, but not too woke, and that you have to find a middle ground so that it can be successful. Because the Mario movie ended up making a lot of money. It grossed $1.3 billion, which apparently, by Shadik in a Box's logic here, was because it didn't go too woke. Unlike that feminist propaganda Barbie movie, which came out that same year and went too woke. And that film only ended up making $1.4 billion. Anyway, I disagree with Shadeep Bluesy's opinion on the Mario movie, and based on the comments section, it seems like most people do as well. To close this video, I want to talk about a sword movie. And no, it's not a fantasy epic or a medieval action film, no. It's a little comedy called Sword of Trust. In the film, while cleaning out her late grandfather's estate, Cynthia discovers an antique sword. A letter comes with it, written by her grandfather, explaining that the weapon belonged to General Sherman of the Union Army during the American Civil War. The letter specifies that it was surrendered to Cynthia's ancestors, and also that the Confederacy were the real winners of that war. Believing they have something valuable on their hands, Cynthia and her friend Mary try to sell it at a pawn shop. Despite the letter, the pawn shop employee, Nathaniel, doesn't believe their story. He does, however, know somebody who does. He watches a conspiracy theorist on YouTube who believes the South really did win the war and will pay $50,000 for any artifacts of that era. There's a lot of running around and haggling, but what the film ultimately arrives at is that Cynthia doesn't believe the Confederacy won the war, and neither does the conspiracy theorist who she's selling the sword to. Cynthia decides to keep the sword because of her sentimental attachment and associating it with her grandfather. The point of the film is that some items are only significant for what we attach to them. For instance, I might be able to sell this bamboo sword to some gullible conservative if I told them that it was used in the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. It truthfully wasn't, but if I said it was, would you pay me $50,000 for it? But that is not the true significance I associate with this sword. I associate its meaning with my early days of attending anime conventions. I remember making new friends, hosting panels, playing games, and just hanging out with like-minded people while we watched and chatted about anime. I don't look at this as some weapon that I'm going to use to defeat all the bullies and the girls who laughed at me. No, this is just a reminder of my youth. And sure, there's some embarrassing stuff from that era, cringeworthy even. But there were moments of great joy that I'd never want to forget. That was where I found hope as a young man. Shad has taken movies that have changed with the paradigm shift of culture and attached them to wokeness. He wants to sell you on the Barbie movie being too woke, or the Super Mario Bros. Movie only being half woke. He wants you to associate these ideas with the media he despises or half despises. He has taken his passion for swords and used them to fight the imaginary dragons of wokeness. He's admitted that since coming out with his more vocal beliefs and politics that he's lost respect of some viewers who liked his sword videos. I'm sure there's some people who would have preferred that he stuck in his lane instead of saying dumb stuff about the Mario movie. But that was Shad's choice to make, and for better or worse, that's the association now. People may never be able to look at Shadiversity's sword videos again without immediately associating him with getting mad at Princess Peach in pants. As for this video, I hope you'll associate it with taking media criticism a little more seriously, being a little more informed on these topics that keep popping up in the algorithm, and maybe even checking out some of those films I recommended. And that's what I've been aiming for with this series of videos on the topic of YouTubers, trying to present a balance of corrections on misinformation, citations of abhorrent politics, and steering viewers towards movies that I love. So hopefully, you've come away with a little something more. In conclusion, Shad is full of shit when talking about movies, his book is gross, and your time would be better spent watching movies like Zero Charisma or Sword of Trust. Don't watch the Mario movie though, that movie just sucks. Hey there folks, thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit like and subscribe for more video essays as well as movie reviews that I do on this channel. If you'd like to support me as well, you can check out my Patreon below, which will give you access to early videos as well as my movie history books. Thanks for watching. Go watch some great movies. There's a whole bunch behind me. You could probably see them. Go watch some Kurosawa. There's some Kurosawa up there.